It's time to bring you yet another amazing episode. And now, welcome your host.
Good to have you on the show. My name is Omobola Stephen, the podcast host of Live Well Lived by Omobola Stephen, a self-improvement and personal development podcast occasioning professionals who are adepts and experts in the topics of personal development and self-improvement, offering disruptive yet constructive mindship conversations that is going to pivot the positive changes and transformation you and I need in life. Now, we emphasize that we need to embrace personal development and self-improvement, because when we do so, we tend to find ourselves along the way. And in finding ourselves, we realize that life always have many bounties to offer us if we don't give up. Now, personal development and self-improvement is a lifelong process. And I need you and I to constantly improve on ourselves in order for us to see these tremendous changes that our soul has always yearned for, and how we can see our life transform to how it was originally meant to be if we don't give up. I'm your host once again, Omobola Stephen, and welcome to Live Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. On today's show, I have Angela Tipton, who is the founder of Fire Your Career. Now, our focus of today's show, we'll be focusing on how to achieve financial freedom. I mean, living financially free. Welcome with me on the show once again, Angela Tipton.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining me on the show. Great to have you once again. So I'm looking forward to a great time because I know this is your area of expertise. So we will be talking about achieving financial freedom. We also talk about how we can align that with also our lifestyles, our career, and how we can also get out of the financial debt.
Yeah, looking forward to having this conversation.
Sure. So first off, when it comes to personal finance, how do we budget money?
Yeah, so good question. So budgeting is very personal to all of us, right? And sometimes we're great at budgeting and sometimes we're not. And there's no harm or foul either way. We only owe that accountability to ourselves. But when it comes to financial freedom, budgeting is really essential. It's important that you know where your money is coming from and where it's going to. So discipline is really important in the process of achieving financial freedom.
All right, absolutely. So we know that we have those who are going to financial worries. Now they experience both mental and emotional issues as a result of this. Is there any way they can cope mentally and emotionally?
Absolutely. And this is something that I talk about in a great deal on my website as well, because your mindset really can make such an impact on how successful you are and how quickly you can achieve a lot of your goals. So the first thing that I start with when it comes to mindset is that be honest with your situation, even if you don't like where you're at today. And it's okay. You know, that describes a lot of us. I was certainly there when I started out my journey. There were certain things that I felt shame about that I hadn't done as well, or that I was disappointed in myself. And those are really real valid feelings. And first of all, it can be uncomfortable and it can be hard to be accepting of those things, but it is so important in order to be able to move forward and achieve more beyond your current state. You need to be able to be accepting of those things. The other thing I talk about mindset work as well is that yeah, there are some of these things that are deep ingrained beliefs that are either helping us or they're hindering us. And this is something that for me has been a very personal journey that honestly I revisit very often, is that I learned that certain concepts I had about money were in some ways helping me, but there were other beliefs that I had about money that were really slowing me down. And I'll just give one example where I used to believe that, and to some degree I still do, that you have to work really hard to earn money. And that's partially true. You don't just make money overnight by doing nothing. But this belief was causing more harm than good. And I was able to observe that in myself over a period of years, where I realized that I would work so hard. I would work night and day. I was in a lot of ways a workaholic, and that was just really unhealthy in a lot of ways. And the truth is that you don't always have a one-to-one relation between the amount that you're working and the amount of money that you're earning, right? So while yes, there is some truth in that belief is a very harmful belief, or it can be a harmful belief when it goes a certain direction. So I'm very passionate about understanding your mindset and being true to yourself about where you're at, even if it makes you uncomfortable, because there's always room for improvement, right? And so there's no shame with wherever you're at today.
But really, how do we find ourselves in a financial debt? Now, that's question number one. The next question is there anything like a beating a culture of debt?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think in fact in a lot of ways we celebrate debt, right? It's all about keeping up with our neighbors and having the nicest house or the nicest car or whatever it is. So yes, we really do. We celebrate debt. And in fact, when we pay off debt, it often goes unnoticed, except to us, right? No one really notices that you've paid off that car, that you paid off that house or whatever it is. But we do celebrate when you've bought that new house or that new car. And I'm not saying that there's shame in that either. I think we all make our choices about what we want to purchase, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a certain culture of believing that this debt is not only okay, but in fact, we should try to get more and buy more. If you don't have more, there's something wrong with you, right? We live in this world that is really driven by the market and by consumerism. And while some of those things can be good, and while we can enjoy some of those things, that's great, there has to be a balance with that. And if you're constantly trying to keep up with the Joneses, you're going to find yourself constantly in debt. So it is one of those where you have to actively work on your mindset again to realize that, okay, this is just not healthy to think this way. We don't just acquire anything we can because the bank will loan us some money. That might be nice to do, but the cost of debt and how much money can be wasted on interest in the long term is astronomical, especially when you think about what could I do with that money instead if I was able to instead invest that. And it really does make a big difference. And that is really key to financial freedom, is understanding that some debt, well, when those choices are made mindfully, can be good, can be okay. They can be part of a strategy depending on what your goals are. But you don't want to just accumulate large amounts of debt, because it becomes a giant burden that is very difficult to overcome.
But really, if we're going to avoid the financial debt, that means that we are not going to be able to afford all the beautiful luxuries that we think of having in the future. So what do you say to that?
So, I mean, that's a really good point. So the thing that is key to financial freedom that we didn't touch on, but we definitely hinted at, is that you really need to live below your means. If you're constantly living at your means, you're going to be, yes, acquiring all of these luxuries that you can afford, which might be nice in the short term, but in the long term, especially when it comes to achieving financial freedom, it's going to be really hard to achieve your goals if financial freedom is a priority for you. Now, that's not to say that you can't have nice things, that you have to eat rice and beans for the rest of eternity. That's not true at all. But we all have to make conscious choices about what are the things that we're going to buy versus where are we going to invest our money instead. So yes, you can still afford those luxuries, but really you have to make a decision about what matters to you. And just remember that trade-off, if you're going to buy something that is more luxurious and nicer, just think about, okay, what could I do with that money if I invested it instead? And there is a trade-off in that.
Right, good to know. Now, moving forward, I'd like us to talk about our finances and also our lifestyle. How can we align our lifestyles to our finances? Because we know the work we pursue, we want to have a great lifestyle, but we need the money to live this kind of life. So how can we begin to align it objectively?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that's something that I talk about quite a bit on my website as well, is that's ultimately what matters, right? When it comes to making buying decisions about when we're going to acquire a debt or not, or when we're going to invest or not. What really matters is that we're aligning it with our lifestyle, and everyone has different priorities, and that looks like very different things for different people. For instance, if you have a family, you might prioritize living in an area that has good schools. That is a choice. You might have to live in a higher cost of living area for a good school. Maybe you don't. But if your priority is to live in a region like that, you're going to have some higher costs potentially for housing and for groceries and things like that. But what ultimately matters is that you're aligning your lifestyle with your goals. So if for instance, you want to retire early, maybe you want to retire by the age of 45 or whatever it is, if you're living in a high cost of living area and you're acquiring debt constantly, you're buying new cars every few years, you're buying the nicest house that you can afford, it's going to be very, very hard to retire at 45. Now, it's not impossible. You could do other things potentially. You might be really successful in starting a business and ramping that up. So I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it is going to be a lot harder. So you have to think about what matters to me most. Something that I really encourage is building a vision board, a dream board. It's something that my family has, and we put in the things that are our priorities. Things that matter to us include things like going on a yearly family trip and putting so much into our investments per year and things like that. So what I think is really helpful with those vision boards is it allows you to visualize whatever your goals are. And then you can also mindfully think about, okay, this goal matters to me a little bit more this year. This one is maybe a little bit more important next year. This one is probably going to take a back seat. It's nice, but it doesn't really fit in with the rest of my goals. So what that allows you to do is be really mindful about what things you're choosing to focus on. And I'll give you just one example of something I have on my vision board. At some point, we'd like to buy a new house. But you know what? That competes with our priorities of investing so much every year. So that's something that is taking a back seat. It's something that we'd like to do at some point and might eventually do, but financial freedom is more important to us and we'd rather invest in that right now. So that is a choice. And by visualizing that and putting that on our vision board, we're able to mindfully think through those things and make those choices. And so we're able to really focus on aligning our lifestyle and our goals. And yeah, we might have to make some choices and certain things might have to take a back seat, but we can always make adjustments in future years and change which things we choose to invest in later years.
Now, quickly, can you tell me some of the biggest mistakes that retirees make?
Yeah, so some of the biggest mistakes that we make, and I know that something that I did is I think we have a tendency to ignore our debt. That's kind of the big one, right? It's one of those things that can be this big monster and it's uncomfortable to look at, and sometimes it even feels embarrassing to think that, oh, I put that much money into that. For me, that was my student debt. When I looked at my student debt and realized that between my husband and myself that we had in excess of over $100,000 in student debt, I was so embarrassed. And I was ashamed of myself for not being able to pay it back the way I wanted to. We eventually built a plan for paying it back and it worked out really well. But yeah, I think the biggest pitfall that I've found is that we have a tendency to ignore those things and make us feel uncomfortable, right? And it wasn't until I took an honest look at our situation, I realized, oh, okay, this is ballooned out of control and we need to get a handle on it. It wasn't until then that I was able to tackle it. And I think that's one of those things where we struggle to be honest with ourselves at times about our situation. We want to turn those blinders on, right? Because that's easier, that's more comfortable to do, because these things can balloon into giant problems and we just don't want to tackle, or we can't be faced to tackle with in that moment. And that for me is the thing that I've observed. And even having conversations with others, I find that tends to be the same thing, is that, we know that this debt that we have is a problem. It's slowing down our progress towards our goals and all of those things, but it's a lot easier to just ignore those problems at the time. But really, to get started on that journey to financial freedom, you have to be honest with yourself, even if it means that you're a little bit uncomfortable and you don't like your current situation. So yeah, I'd say that's the biggest pitfall. I think the other thing I've noticed too is that living in the society that we live in is that debt, as we talked about, is celebrated. We celebrate when someone buys a new car, but we don't think about the burden that comes from having that loan or whatever that cost is in the long term. And so that is something that is also difficult to overcome, and realize that we have the chance to really challenge the status quo. But it requires us to do that, and to realize that might mean that you stand out and that you're different from others. And that's okay too. Sometimes that's better even.
Thank you so much, Angela. Now we talk about career and also finances. We want to go into a career that's going to give us financial fulfillment in the long run. Now we're not being selfish; we are being sincere here and being practical. But really, there are some careers that doesn't really bring the financial fulfillment. So, what's your own take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely celebrate getting into a career that will allow you to achieve financial freedom, whatever that looks like for you. Now, that said, you can achieve financial freedom if you can live below your means on almost any salary. Now, I say almost because it is going to be a lot more difficult to achieve financial freedom if you have a lower income. But if you are super disciplined and don't acquire a lot of debt and you live below your means, you can do it. But what matters, and again, going back to that lifestyle, is that you're aligning your career with your lifestyle goals. If you desire a nicer house, for instance, or you live in a higher cost of living area, you might want to consider choosing a career that would allow you to have a higher income. Now, traditionally, that tends to be more tech-oriented fields, engineering types, working in the biotech industry, working in business, things like that, becoming a doctor. Those are some of the higher end professions right now. I'm not saying you have to do that, but what is really important is that you reflect on what kind of career would allow you to achieve your goals. And that might be on a salary that doesn't require a degree. Now, that's very, very possible. Like I said, it's going to be harder to achieve financial freedom if you do that, but not impossible. What matters is that you're reflecting on those things that matter most to you. You're aligning your career with your goals. I'm a very avid proponent of continuing to build up your career. So it doesn't really matter where you start, but when you build up your career and you are able to receive promotions and you gain new skills that allow you to increase your marketability to employers, those are all things that will help you demand a higher income out of your employers, and that will help you achieve financial freedom that much sooner. I've heard of people in engineering fields that, with alongside having their high incomes and being really, really disciplined, they could achieve financial freedom in just a matter of a few years. And now that sounds wild. And for most of us, that is not very feasible. But if you are in a high income field and you're super, super disciplined and are really great at living below your means, financial freedom is very achievable in a short amount of time, but you have to be really mindful about the choices that you're making. You can do it, but it's not always for everyone. Not everyone wants to be an engineer or can be an engineer. So you have to be honest with yourself about who you are, what you're passionate about. That's the thing too, is that you don't necessarily want to get into a career where you have no passion. You'll probably burn out pretty fast. And I've experienced that level of burnout as well too, where for a while I was passionate about what I was doing, and then I just lost that passion and I burned out. And that is really tough to overcome. So it is important to find some balance between, okay, what am I interested in? And what do I want for my income and for my lifestyle? And what am I going to be satisfied with today? What does my existing skill set allow me to do today? So it's important to be thoughtful about that. But I know I'm saying this as if it happens overnight. It doesn't. This is something that for me in my own career really took a period of years of being really thoughtful, of reflecting on my priorities and being really conscious about the choices I made. And anyone can do it. I have some really great tools that will help you pick a career and help you build up your career on my website. And those things can be really helpful to help you understand your path forward.
Absolutely great to know. Thanks for sharing that with my audience, Angela. Now, a new body of research on women and their financial wellness, it shows that 94% of women, they believe that they will be personally responsible for their finances at some point in their lives. Now, despite this fact or this reality on ground, about half of women, that is 48% of this population, they feel confident about their finances, and only 28% they feel empowered to take this action. Now, I'd like us to focus on this 28%. Why is this a point, or why is this a population low?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And honestly, I hadn't heard those figures before now, so I'll admit even I'm a little bit surprised about that. My hope, of course, is that everyone or most people feel empowered to make decisions about their finances and in their careers and really any aspects of their lives. But to do that, we really have to own that ourselves. And I think as women, it can be an uncomfortable thing, right? We live in a very patriarchal society and we're used to that. But I've always been one of those that's really ambitious. And my desire is to inspire others to really own their lives and own their futures. And the only way you can do that is by really taking the first step and understanding your situation and then deciding to do just a little bit better, right? The thing that I am also an avid proponent of is incremental improvements. And I truly believe this is the best path forward to really grand success. And I'm just going to use an example of what I used or what I did in the past. I was never a runner. I actually really enjoy running now. But if you told me 15 years ago that I would work on running a half marathon, in fact, if you'd asked me to run a 5K, I would have laughed in your face. I was not a runner. I did not like running. I was very frustrated about running. I could never imagine enjoying it. But I started running in very short increments. And I do mean really short increments. I was not a runner. I started doing some walking. I think I started walking maybe a mile here and there. At some point, I started running a half mile, and even that felt painful. But over time, I worked my way up and I started running a mile, and then suddenly that started feeling doable. And then over time, I started to realize that, I'm actually a decent distance runner. I never would have imagined that. But I started running a little bit further. I went to a mile and a half and then 2 miles and so on. So if you had told me in a year from the date I'd started that I'd be running 3 to 5 miles regularly, I would never have believed it to be possible. But I didn't start doing that overnight. In fact, if I tried to do that just one day, I would have truly not been happy at all. And I would not have been having a good time about running. But I used incremental improvements where I just did a little bit better, just do 1% better tomorrow and then the next day. And it's amazing that 1% really can do amazing things. It doesn't feel like much at the time, but if you do that consistently, and consistency is key when it comes to things like that, that consistency can really allow you to achieve these really grand things. And I've used that in other aspects of my life that I frankly did not believe was even possible. And I still, reflecting on it, if someone else had told me that that was possible, I would not have believed it. I really had to experience that firsthand myself. But those incremental improvements, it doesn't feel like much at the time, but it is enough. And it gets you to amazing heights if you are consistent. And sometimes that is all it takes. So it's okay. Again, if you're not happy with where you're at today, just do 1% better tomorrow and 1% better after that. And I think that really goes for anything in life. It goes for anything with your finances. It goes from feeling empowered about where you're at. Just do a little bit better the next day and continue that consistently, and you can achieve amazing things.
Now, Angela, don't you think that we need to start having the discussion on how women can begin to redefine their finances? Come on, let's talk.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that this is one of those things that, yes, we need to be honest about where we're at. We as women need to say, enough is enough. I need to own this. I need to look at this. I can't rely on someone else to do this for me. I need to be honest with myself about this. So I absolutely agree. I think that we as women, we as really anyone should feel empowered to look at our situation. And I get it, numbers aren't for everyone. I have a grandmother that I love very dearly that her finances are just not her thing. And I get it. It's not everyone's most exciting topic. I personally love it, but I realize that I'm a bit of an outlier in that respect. But if we're going to do better, if we're going to achieve financial freedom, we have to own that ourselves. We really can't we can't rely on others. You can rely on others, but I think when it comes to our finances, we really need to own that ourselves, and we need to be willing to change our situation and own that and understand that, even if it's frustrating or not fun to deal with, right? I think that will help you feel more empowered is if you can look at that and spend the time on it, even if it's not your favorite thing to do.
Right. Do you have any important information you like to share? Perhaps an important project you think the audience of the podcast, they're going to benefit from. Come on, you can share that if you have any.
Yeah, absolutely. So I encourage everyone to start reading. I have a free ebook on my website called 7 Ways to Fire Your Career. So it's really a great place for you to get started on your journey to financial freedom and to also help you build up your career. It's a really simple ebook to follow. You can download it right on my website at fireyourcareer.com/ebook. And yeah, I encourage everyone to start with that. I also have some really great resources if you're looking for specific areas that you want to work on, like your career, for instance. I talk to women that have disabilities as well on how to get a reasonable accommodation in the workplace, for instance. So there are some very specialized tools and resources you can use right on the website. But I encourage people to start by reading that ebook, The 7 Ways to Fire Your Career. It's a great place to get started.
Thank you so much, Angela. Can you share a parting word with the audience?
Yeah, so the thing that I'm most passionate about when it comes to financial freedom is that it allows you to live life on your terms. And I think the thing that is often misunderstood is that financial freedom really doesn't have to be very hard to achieve. I know it feels like a lofty goal. It can feel really impossible, but it's not. If you just start with those incremental improvements, you really can achieve amazing things. And I truly believe that if more people could live on their terms, the world would be a better place. We would be happier in the work that we were doing. We'd be happier around others. All of the things would just be better, right? We would inspire others to be better. We would help people live more happily. So that's why I'm really passionate about helping people achieve financial freedom. I truly believe it can help make the world a better place.
Right, good to know. Thanks for sharing that with my audience. We wish you best of luck, sincerely from the bottom of my heart. And on behalf of the audience, in all the projects that you embark upon, especially in this ebook and other subsequent projects that you embark upon, Angela, it's been great having this discussion with you as we explore the topic on how we can achieve financial freedom and living on our own term. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Really had a great time indeed.
I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure, it's my pleasure. If you'd like to catch up any missed episodes of the podcast, you can catch up on any missed episode or on any podcast distribution platforms you bump into, or any podcast cross promotion platforms online, and do have a great time listening to Live Reality by Omobola Stephen, a podcast that focuses on disruptive yet constructive mindship conversations on topics that are related to personal development and self-improvement. I need you always to stay safe. I talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much, Angela. We had a great show.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. I always enjoy talking about this, and you had some great questions that really made me think. So those facts and figures, I have never heard those before. I was honestly pretty surprised to hear about those, about how many women feel empowered in their finances. I honestly expected it to be higher than that. So yeah, pretty surprising to hear some of that.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and leave us a review.